Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining. If you've been following me on LinkedIn, you can see that I've been sort of working around this idea of transformation, which is part of my reinduction back into World's View. What do we mean by transformation? What do we mean by significant and long-lasting change? And what are the elements of that? And I did post a few things on the way here. So what I'd started to think about was these first-time rituals and their impact on the overall organization. I'd started thinking about the employee onboarding ritual. So when an employee first meets the organization and the organization first meets that new employee, and all that good practice around anchoring the employee and the organizational relationship in the form of an onboarding or induction. And I use the word ritual fairly intentionally. And then Martin, who's on this call, wrote to me and said one of the things that they had tremendous success with is taking pieces of the new employee onboarding and pushing it into the recruitment process, so that that introduction, that relationship started at recruitment, not just in the onboarding phase. And I'm hoping Martin can talk a little bit about the power of that in some of the breakouts that we'll have. So it seems to me that there's this accepted thing around the employee recruitment ritual. And of course, whether you call it a ritual or not, it's ritualized. We have our ways of recruiting new employees. And then to the extent that anything intentional is done on employee onboarding, it is ritualized. And then what are the first-time leadership induction rituals is what today is going to concentrate on. Full disclosure up front, I don't think I'm disclosing anything new. And what I'm hoping is that in the breakout discussions, we might find something that's new or something that's useful for all of us that makes individuals and their organizations more effective. So let's get going with that, having set the stage. As usual, our process is to send you off to meet each other, and then bring you back, and I'll share some of my thinking. We won't debrief you when you come back. Then send you off again to deepen that conversation, and then we'll debrief together and see what we discover. Today does use Gantz 2010, and I have the article. I think I love this article where Gantz looks at the work of leadership, particularly through volunteer organizations. So these massive volunteer organizations where they have, tens of thousands of people enrolled in volunteer groups around the world. And the ritual importance of recruiting leaders or organizers in the non-profit world or social activism world, and how that recruitment of new leaders and induction of new leaders or organizers and the inculcation of the values and the work where nobody is an employee, nobody is being paid, and all of the emphasis is on that leadership influence. So any of you who want a copy of that article, let me know afterwards and I'll send it to you. It's a long read, but I think it's lovely. So we'll use Gantz as the lens for some of this. To get you started, I want to send you out for about 10 minutes to get to know each other. Liesel's going to set up some breakout groups. Maybe you could just jot down on a piece of paper what brought you here today, and then what real-world examples do you have of that frontline first-time leadership development? Good or bad? Remember that we obviously are interested in building out that base of both. and let's see what if that gets your minds into the conversation. Liesel, if you wouldn't mind, you can send people off to the breakouts.
Right, I'm going to open the rooms. You should get an invitation on your screen now.
Well, I hope that you had a good meeting with each other. While you were away, Byron joined us, so Byron will get to join one of those groups in the next breakout. But what I'll do now is add my 2 cents worth to this conversation, and then you'll go back into the breakouts to process that. Diesel, I see somebody else is in the waiting room. So I want to start with a friend of mine becoming a manager for the first time, a team leader as a firefighter. This is a fairly recent story. So this is quite a mature man who's been a firefighter for a long time, and for whatever reason, for many reasons, had never taken a leadership role. And last year did the necessary qualifications to become a manager, a first-time team leader. And he and I were having a couple of drinks around a fire, and he was talking about this experience of he'd always been a bit of an anarchist. So everything that he used to think about managers, he suddenly realized was now about him. The bosses were him. And then everything he thought about his colleagues, you know, sometimes thinking of some of his colleagues as heroes, some of his colleagues as lazy, some of his colleagues as should never have been here at all, are suddenly the people who report to him. You know, so it's me, it's them, and he suddenly saw all of them differently, and he knew that he had to see himself differently. When he started to think about all that development stuff, all the training, so in a firefighter's life, things aren't burning down all the time, fortunately, and in between it's quiet, and they are mostly to prepare. And that preparation keeps them safe and saves the lives of others. And all that development stuff that he used to resent going to, now he realized was just so essential. And he had to find ways to get what were his colleagues to do that training that he used to duck and dive. He also thought about the place. So those stations where he could complain about broken equipment or dirty work areas and feel that people just weren't, you know, taking care of things, suddenly was his responsibility to make sure that the equipment worked and the work area was clear. And partly as he had his, you know, second whiskey, he said he realizes that he's becoming grumpy at home, that there's a sort of overflow of this anxiety into his home, and that he doesn't really know where to start. We were talking just before he was going to begin. A firefighter's story, they often are fairly lonely spots. As you know, he's been in the paper in the Cape, facing those Cape fires in that kind of profile picture that you see on the screen. And suddenly he was going to be responsible for people. So that was last year. We were chatting about it, and I was thinking about just how important it is to give support to people as they make that transition. Gantz talks about the work of leadership in 4 areas. The first one is develop relationship, and you kind of see a little bit of that in the firefighter story as he reimagines the relationship that he needs to have with his colleagues and with his boss. and with himself. These sort of three legs of those relationships, and with his new role. He has to find a relationship with that new role. And Gantz says those relationships are the basis on which you then build story. And the story that Gantz talks about is a story often fueled by anger or frustration in the social movements, but very importantly in all organizations, fueled by some sort of hope that the future can be better, that things can be better, that we can make a difference. I know there's that old cliche that hope is not a strategy. In fact, I've been guilty of saying that too many times to count. Hope is not a strategy. But Gantz talks about hope in that story layer as being a precondition to strategy. That without hope, there cannot be strategy, because without hope, you can't conceptualize of a better future. So in those stories, to be telling stories about where things have worked, how things might be better, how people like us can do more, and then to create strategy. And when Gantz talks about creating strategy, I love the way he's simple and direct about it. He said it's to figure out how you could do something with the resources you have. So not to dream up resources that don't exist, but to look at the people and the assets and whatever you have, and to now say, we can do this. This is what we're able to achieve. And then he gets to what I think of as the more traditional management end, enable the action. And he talks there about, setting goals, achieving individual commitment, and holding people to account. So, you said you were going to do this, you didn't do it. What happened there? Let's talk about that performance feedback piece. So if a new manager or a new leader suddenly has to become aware of the need to develop relationship, build story, create strategy, and enable action, surely we can create rituals that help them to do that, to support that acquisition of those skills. Smith and Stewart had a lovely article in 2011 where they talk about rituals in organizations in general, and then as part of that, they talk about the function of rituals in an organizational setting to provide meaning, to manage anxiety. And my sense is that anxiety levels continue to rise. That's our zeitgeist. That's the conditions that we all find ourselves in. It wasn't just COVID that, the pandemic didn't just drive up anxiety. We're in a world where the pace of change does continue to accelerate, and that's a bit of an anxiety engine. Isolation is an anxiety engine, and all the benefits of digital meetings do tend to isolate us, and they can generate anxiety. Rituals exemplify and reinforce the social order. Rituals communicate important values. Rituals enhance group solidarity. Rituals include and exclude others, which at face value might seem, not woke enough. But I think there is this thing of, if we're talking about first-time leadership, then some people are first-time leaders and some people are not. There's already a separation. As my firefighter friend became a supervisor, his colleagues who did not become supervisors are not in this conversation. He is in this conversation. And rituals, define who we are as our organization relative to our competitors, or, that sort of distinction, which actually becomes really important later, I think, and your ability to handle that inclusion and exclusion in a healthy way, to be as we say in the diversity, DEI conversations, it's not about making everybody the same. It's about recognizing those differences. So that there's something in there that's useful. Rituals signal commitment. Rituals manage work structure. Rituals prescribe and reinforce significant events. And so for me, I think there's something about ritualizing the transition to first-time leadership. Why do it? Well, what's the benefit of helping people be better at relationship building, be better storytellers, be better strategic planners, and be better action managers? I think there are tremendous benefits in investing in this. Of course, there's an individual effect. So my friend, the firefighter, I think just with a bit of training would increase his clarity on the role and reduce the anxiety that comes with the role. There should be a group effect, because if he's more effective as his first-time supervisor, the group of people that he has to supervise in turn have clearer meaning, clearer action strategies, and reduced anxiety. If that is true of all of the groups in the front line of the organization, there must be an organizational effect. The organization should be better off relative to its peers or its competitors, and relative to if it had done nothing. And then I believe that there's a societal effect. In many ways, organizations are, chronic in society. And so if we can get the youngsters learning relationship building, storytelling, strategic planning, and action management, that ripples out into schools and churches and into the broader society. So I think it's healthy to invest. I know there's that old cliche of, what if we train these first-time managers and they leave? And, I think there's an argument. I know the counter argument is, what if you don't train them and they stay? And that's where you get the group effect and organizational effect. If you don't train them, you get negative effects. If you do train them and they leave, you still harvest the societal effect. And then I think there's a final piece of that. A lot of employees will loop back. So they might churn out of your organization and come back into the organization later. So I genuinely think that every rand spent pays out. What should it look like? I think, sorry about the lots of words on this slide. I want to kick off with, Skulk is on this call. Skulk and I talked about compulsory. So should it be compulsory for a first-time leader or manager to attend a leadership development program? Skulk's conclusion in the context of a university is no, that academic freedom precludes the word compulsory. And my conclusion at the moment is that leadership development should preclude the word compulsory. Leadership is so much about choice. And you can't role model choice by making the first training course compulsory. And so there's something about making that first program optional. The content, though, should be simple and direct. It should develop in the content, it should build the relationship to self, my role, the group I'm going to lead, my boss, and the organization. So orienting that relational network should be part of that first-time leader development program. And then role modeling development of story. So how do I establish a sense of direction? How can I awaken employee agency through hope with examples? And those, practicing that storytelling with peers and with maybe more senior executives participating is very useful. And then how do I develop strategy? So the ability to understand what the objectives are, what is needed from me, what is needed from my group, and what resources do I have at my disposal? And then that classic OD liberating structures exercise. What's your 15%? You know, what is the small thing that you and your team can do that moves us forward? So understanding the basics of developing strategy, and then understanding the basics of action management. So being able to sit in front of an employee and say, all right, this is what we're trying to do, and this is why. This is what I need from you. I need you to commit. I need you to mobilize and deliver. And then I, as the leader, have to have the confidence and the basic skill to coach you and give you performance feedback. So that's content. Cadence. How often should you run your first-time leadership development program? And I think that's directly linked to your churn cycle. So if your frontline leadership group is churning every 12 months, for whatever reason, maybe it's a fast growth company and those first line leaders get promoted again into second and third, which means you've got new first line leaders coming in every 12-month cycle, then it should be every 12 months. I last year was exposed to a badly run firm that was churning 100% of its new recruits every 6 months. Obviously, there was a broader problem than leadership, but that first line leadership, there was no training at all. So there was no glue there, but there were also problems in terms of the recruitment process and the compensation plan. So how often should you do it? Inside the churn cycle. In what context? I argue very strongly for in-company, peer group, that as long as you have more than 2 or 3 within your churn cycle, then do it in company and do them in groups of 2 or 3 at a time. And then use the ritualized structure. So you could do it in a light touch, medium touch, or a thorough touch. Light touch, I've seen a real success with running a book club for new managers, where something like Harvard Business Review's 10 must reads for new managers is used as the basis. And a senior executive runs each book club where they talk through the article, locate its meaning in the organization, get to know one another, have a bit of wine, share story, build meaning. Medium touch, a 6-session program. Worldview has leadership, where over 6 sessions, each of the elements of relationship, story, strategy, and action are more dealt with more thoroughly. But those 6 sessions could be completed in 6 weeks. And then the sort of deeper touch example, like 9 Conversations in Leadership, 9 sessions, takes at least 4.5 to 6 months to get through. And the point is that each of these should be repeated in the cadence, so that ritual binds both the new leader and the senior execs and the learning and development team or the HR team in continually reviewing and revising and tweaking this ritual over time, which results in developing leadership in layers over time. You have these cohorts of people that are coming through where, I think that if you do nothing, then most of your new leaders will get their ideas about leadership on YouTube or TikTok. They'll learn their leadership from social media. It's very low in organizational context, and I think it has relatively low leadership impact overall, because leadership is always contextual. It's contingent on the people and the place that you're leading. So I like the idea of high organizational context. At the very least, learn leadership from an in-company role model or mentor, and that can be structured in some way. Or even better, learn leadership in cohorts with those role models. And if your business is too small and you don't have enough leaders, then at least send people off into public programs so that they're still getting that cohort base, and try and pick those public programs so that it is similar people. So leadership development in layers over time. And you think about organizational leadership as much as you think about the individual leader. Well, that's my 2 cents worth in terms of where I'm at in thinking about this ritual of frontline leadership. And hopefully it's given you something to now either tear apart or build on as you go back into your breakout groups. Back in your breakout groups, what are your thoughts? And then could you come back to the plenary session with examples of good or bad first-time manager and leader development? What's working? What's not working? What's innovative? What can we share with each other? We'll give you, I think, about 15 minutes, maybe slightly more, 17 minutes in the breakout groups. And of course, as usual, if you're an experienced World View OD Cafe person, you'll know that we'd like you to have one person come back and just summarize what you observed in that group and what that group was. We don't want a full summary of what everybody said. We want to know, how's the group answering the question? What are the examples of good or bad first time? What is working? What is not working? Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you in about 17 minutes. Enjoy your breakaways. If you've been on these calls before, you know that we're transitioning now into hearing what happened in those in the breakout rooms and trying to build something between us. So hope that breakout was interesting. Will somebody from group 1 kick us off? What did you guys hear, and what are your thoughts on this topic?
So that was Lorraine, Luann, Lynn, and Mbali.
Yes, Luann offered to give feedback for us. She has such a great story to tell.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Luann Smoller. I work for a company called Astro Operations. We're an integrated poultry producer, and we were actually running a program, long-standing program for about 7 or 8 years, for leadership development at 3 levels, junior, middle, and senior management, in collaboration with a university. And yeah, and I actually just my reference to that was because you spoke about almost leadership development is should not be prescriptive. I'm not saying in the way that it's the program is structured, but from an individual perspective, what we found from running a program and then obviously brought to a halt at when COVID struck, and then thereafter giving us the opportunity to reevaluate where we wanted to go. So in a program where you have this very structured different modules that you do over the course of the year, graduation ceremony at the university thereafter, etc., it was very, very good from the perspective of really creating a sense of pride in acquiring the qualification, and you were recognized with a special blazer and wore that to company functions and that kind of thing. So it was creating that group, but then we also saw that we should open that not just to senior management at an operation nominating people to attend, but also asking people who are interested in attending, sending your CV and a short motivation why you think this would assist. That was an interesting shift in that program. And then after COVID, we've been doing a lot of work now on our succession planning. One of our core drivers is to develop people from within to progress in the organization. The nature of the work that we do, or our business, is very specialized. Even though the volumes and that are huge, if I had to say, in the poultry industry, the number of key role players is small. So it's a small pool of talent that everybody is tracing, shall I say. And so that led to two things. One is when we saw the outcome of the formal program and how open employees were to putting up their hand and saying, I think I have potential, I'm not in a leadership role yet, but I think it will still benefit me and my growth, etc. We then obviously now have moved into, first thing, more formal on a platform, succession planning, and creating obviously talent pools, and then also reviewing what kind of training we want to offer. And that's where I think the one comment resonated with me, that it should be a voluntary process, and you cannot make it mandatory, which was obviously, if you attend this level course previously, you have to finish the whole module or the whole course and all the modules contained in that. Yes, it gave you a very good overview of business as a whole. And if you are like myself in human resources, you may not have been exposed to all that thinking. So it did add value, most certainly. But now to look at a more holistic kind of development plan, and to have a mixture of like courses like MBAs and perhaps still management development programs, obviously at university, offered by some of the business school, and then also maybe specialized training, because part of our succession planning is to open it to everybody and ask those employees to go in and indicate your willingness to progress in the organization, and whether you want to go into a managerial role or a specialist role, etc. And then taking all that info into account, building up our 9-box grid for specific positions, and then also in general for the whole on various occupational bands for the organization. But then also having a formalized, shall I say, training and development plan, which contains a more holistic, shall I say, spread of qualifications, short courses, workshops, mentoring, coaching, etc., to address that specific person's, shall I say, gaps. And that may differ from individual to individual, which we had not yet put in practice, but I do believe we're doing it in a more informal way, but I do believe that will be the way to go, is opposed to giving everybody the same material and expecting them to do that, is to actually fill the gap, shall I say, and create well-rounded people.
Luann,
that's my input.
That's a brilliant, I think, example of probably the top end of intentional development in the leadership space in the 3 tiers. I love the fact that it's intentional. There is ritual. You're repeating the same kinds of programs.
Yes.
And you've got this ritual of graduation, the ritual of the blazer. There's a ritualized element in it with totems. I also love the fact that, I read a great article recently that says you shouldn't have a leadership development program and a succession plan, that there should be one program. And I get the sense, from you that that's what you've done. I've got a couple of questions quickly that if you can answer them quickly, so we've got a bit of time for the other groups. The first question is, if somebody goes to the expensive programs like the MBAs or the management development programs at the varsity,
Yes.
do you have a lock-in? Do you have a payback period or have payback time to lock them in? And the second question is this paying off for your firm? Does your firm seem to be doing better than your competitors?
Two things. One, yes, we do have a especially for so you have lots of compliance training and then smaller short courses, but we do have a lock-in in all of those with regard to our expectation of how long, and it obviously is very dependent on the program you attend. So something like an MBA, obviously the lock-in period would be longer, and yes, so that is our focus. The other is our company is very committed to development within and progression, or developing our own talent first. So that actually starts in at recruitment. And I was just making the comment there, I think it was Richard Branson that said he hires for potential. And that's not always possible because sometimes you would need certain qualifications to be available, and university level, CA, that kind of thing. So you have an expectation when you recruit the person, and obviously also looking at that potential of how can this person be developed going forward.
Thanks,
and
Joanne.
I think what that does do is it does give institutional expertise, because you have I made the comment about many people in our industry have been in this industry for many, many years, whether in another company coming to us or through our own company. We have very long service employees as well, which is something I think to be proud of. And I do believe that core of knowledge and experience most certainly gives you a competitive edge, definitely.
Well, do you have any evidence that it's paid off in your bottom line? Are you more profitable than your competitors? Do you seem to be growing faster? Is there any evidence on the organizational performance end? And if you don't know, that's fine.
Yes. No, I think I can, if I could say, we a long time ago were part of Tiger Brands as part of the agricultural, and we split away and became our own holding company. And in that whole long history, we have only ever increased our financial results. So to me, the bottom line of success is obviously how successful financially your company is as well. So to me, one is the retention of staff, and the other is then financial success, and through good times and bad. And I think also that having that that institutional knowledge allows you to get through the bad times. I mean, I'm sure you're all well aware, besides the terrible effect of load shedding on the poultry industry, with regard to, you know, the way that that the whole production process is structured. Load shedding was absolutely terrible for many industries. So shortly after COVID, we obviously worked the whole way through COVID from a food security perspective. We were regarded as an essential, shall I say, essential industry. And so there was just recovered from that, and we went into this terrible load shedding from 2022 into 2023. And then last year, HPAI, which is highly pathogenic avian influenza, struck South Africa. It had already been in the country, but last year was a very, very bad year for all sectors of the
have to cut you there, I'm afraid.
industry.
Otherwise, I'm worried that we're going to do a review of the poultry
Yes.
industry. I need to get the other two groups in. So what I'm hearing is, yes, you guys were resilient. That investment that you make produced resilience.
Absolutely.
Sorry I want to just invite group 2 then to share what they, and thank you, and that was, I wanted to actually stick with that for the remainder of the time, but I think
No.
the group 2 and 3 contribution. We need to have a session just dedicated to the survival of the poultry industry. Who's going to represent group 2? What did you hear and what were your thoughts?
Martin,
Craig.
Skalk,
Okay.
and Tody. Martin, are you going?
Yeah, I will do. Okay. Yeah, my name is Martin Kopsch. I run my own e-learning business, but the conversation that we looked at in our group was really around the role of, and it kind of goes into the firefighter, becoming the new supervisor. And we said invariably people make the mistake in companies of taking their technically most competent people and making them supervisors. Now, certainly my background, I spent many years with De Beers Group, the diamond mining company, and that was certainly the experience we had there also. So you took somebody who was technically competent, loves his job, and make him a supervisor. And we realized, and I'm going to say to our horror, that people did not want to be supervisors because they carried so much responsibility. If anything went wrong, they were blamed. So you approached this guy and said, hey, well done. You're now a supervisor. And they would say, well, then I have to resign. So we realized there was a huge problem. And what we discovered and discussed in our group now as well is the underlying culture in a company needs to support management development and needs to support leadership development. It's not just training and development. It needs to be ongoing coaching. Okay, so just by putting people onto programs, onto training courses, that's fantastic and it must be done. There's no doubt about that. But how do you then increase the competence of your supervisor, of your junior manager? How do you allow them to get more what we call soft skills, interacting with people skills? And as somebody once said, soft skills are the hardest skills to get, actually. So yeah, I think that's incredibly important, is the coaching to help people and the organizational support to make them want to achieve now that they are becoming the boss. Okay. And we really looked at culture being the foundation of your company. And if you don't have a strong culture, Todi was talking about, they spend more and more time fighting fires, things going wrong, emergency meetings, and starting to realize this is a situation that's just running away. So they started developing people, not just through training courses, but also looking at 1-hour sessions or 45-minute sessions, even as much as one-to-one with experienced guys, getting input from the more junior person, talking to them. What is really working? What is the situation really on the ground? I remember in mining, we had a lady supervisor and she had to go underground. And then one of the guys came to me, an elderly gentleman, and he said to me, Martin, you cannot put this lady underground. It is much too dangerous. And I looked at him, I said, what are you talking about? And he said, people are isolated down there. Mining underground is a very different environment. He says, she's physically in danger. So we learn things by starting to share more and more and by trying to flatten out the organization. So leading all towards culture. So Some of the other things, should it be compulsory? Absolutely not. It cannot be compulsory. Some people told us straight out, if you want to make me a supervisor, forget it. I'm leaving the company. And we did a lot of development into doing personality assessments. Does this person actually have what it takes to lead people? And got a lot of benefit from that. So, sorry, in the interests of time, I'm going to cut it short here. And I don't know if my colleagues in the group want to add anything, but I think I've kind of covered the gist of what we spoke about.
All right. Tori's got her hand up, so please come in, Tori.
I think she's applauding.
Yes,
Oh,
I
it's
was trying to
applause.
upload.
One of the things that I did hear there, and then Luann, I'll come over to you, was something about that leadership induction. In my mind, part of that ritual should have the new leader and the experienced leaders forming relationship and sharing stories as part of that induction, but then to figure out how to make that sticky so that those senior junior relationships continue outside of the formal program, that part of the ritual is that ongoing conversation driven into the culture, supported maybe through formal meetings and so on. But if there's enough time to build relationship and share stories in the induction piece, you want a significant part of those relationships to be sticky afterwards. I like that. Luann, very quickly, and then we're going to go to group 3.
Yeah, I just want to say I like very much what the second group had to say about the subject they covered. And culture is so important, but I also think a lot of what that development is creating confidence in the manager, and that's not something a course can teach you or anything like that. That confidence comes with, one, I'm prepared to, and I know what to do in a situation, and the other is I also I practice it over and over. So I think that confidence is something, and it doesn't have to be like in your face kind of thing. It's just that you know what to do in a circumstance, you know how to lead your people. But I think that's something that's not easily taught. It's something that often can be transferred from a very or a more supportive senior manager, definitely.
Thanks
Yes,
very
in
much.
fact, if I can perhaps add to that, that is actually where we started, is we got volunteers out of senior management to come forward as coaches, putting up their hand and saying, yes, I want to make a difference. I believe in the culture of this company, and I volunteer my time as that glue of bringing the new leaders, the new managers, the new supervisors, and being there anytime that if a supervisor had a problem that he couldn't solve, he could phone his coach and say, what would you do? How would you act like this? And even just that act, that commitment from senior and executive manager to make their time available created a transformation that was positive. So yeah, thank you.
Group 3.
Excellent.
Group 3, bring us home.
Barend, Richard, and Sabaki.
I think it might be you, Barend, who's going to, I don't know if you guys figured out who would speak for the group. Barend, would you like to, or Sabaki, there you are. It looks like you're ready to go.
No, not quite. I didn't make notes. Actually, I was going to ask Richard to lead the conversation, and I'll just add as he goes. Is he still on call?
Well, Richard's one of the world's few
summary.
we like to try and get our guests to speak. So Richard would speak in self-defense. What did you take away, Sabaki? Just off the top of your head, what were your thoughts? What do you hear?
Yeah, I think top of my head was we touched on the good leaders. Because that's one of the questions we had to talk to. So where we indicate that it's a leader that empowers, someone who would empower their team, someone who would allow and enable their team to, to be themselves. And the other point that we spoke about is I also shared with my team the leadership development program that we had in my employment space, that we had a leadership development program that was divided into 3 pillars, where we had a personal mastery for people to understand themselves, because it has to start with the self before you can engage other people. We also had a leadership peel, you as a leader, different types of leaders that you will go through, that you'll experience as a leader, or the hats that you have to wear as a leader and what those meant. And one other thing that we also had there was you as a team, with you within the team, or you leading the team. So that's another thing that we also had as part of the program. We also had a component of leaders as coaches, because we also felt that many a times leaders are burdened with coming with solutions, their own teams. But when you coach a team, everything else changes, because you don't provide solutions. Many a times when a person comes to you, they have an answer. You just have to ask the right questions for them to get to their problems, solutions. So yeah, I think, I don't know if my other team members will add. But I think there was also a point that I think it's Brendan that he raised, in terms of sometimes it's difficult to tell a good leader vis-a-vis a bad leader, because you'll have 12 people that reports to you, and you'll have 5 that will say he's bad, and you'll have 3 that will say we're not sure, and you'll have the remaining number that will say he's actually good. So you're a bit caught up in this thing that you usually are not sure as to where are you as a leader. So that was quite interesting that he brought into the conversation. So sorry about that. So yeah, thank you. In the interest of time, thanks, colleagues.
Sabaki, beautifully done. I know that you weren't prepared to give feedback for your group, but I thought in the end you did a tremendous job. Thank you. It is 10:31. I'm going to wrap it up. What I hear, for me at least, supports a lot of what Gantz was saying in terms of the work of leadership. Where Sabaki ended, the need to help our first-time leaders and managers to coach. And coaching often centers on giving feedback. So giving feedback in that coaching way around the performance conversation, which was Gantz's last piece, that enabling action. So we've agreed on something. I observe your results, and I need to give you feedback, and I need to support you. That's the enabling action piece. The step before that, creating strategy, trying to figure out how, if I'm a chicken producer and we're facing COVID and we need to work through under lockdown conditions, or I'm a chicken producer and we've got avian flu coming through, finding solutions, creating strategy, developing plans. The step before that, building story, so that we have hope, we have a belief that the future can be better and we can get through this. And that very, very first step of building relationship with myself, as Sabaki said, with my new role, how do I understand leadership, with my boss, so that I've got a sticky relationship and they can support me as I move through my journey. And of course, building relationship with my team so that I can build story, build strategy, and build action. Everybody, thanks for your contributions today. I hope you've all left with something, that you'll come back to a World's View Cafe next time and bring a friend. Have a wonderful, wonderful long weekend if you're taking one, or at the very least a good break tomorrow. Cheers, everyone.